Welcome to episode 46 of Anglican Unscripted, the world's only video podcast for Anglicans and about Anglicans and for people who don't have cable TV. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today is July 27th, 2012.
What's up? This your boy Antoine Dotson. And a lot of people from the gay community has been coming to me telling me that I shouldn't eat from Chick-fil-A and stuff like that. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, that's so crazy. Why? You know what I'm saying? And they started explaining to me about, the gay marriage thing and how, certain people or a person from Chick-fil-A doesn't approve of it. Just let me tell you this. I have uncles and aunties as well who does not approve of gay marriages and stuff like that, but they respect me. I don't care about one person's, opinion or how they feel. That's the way they feel. That's fine. Chick-fil-A makes good meals and I eat there, you know what I'm saying, quite frequently. So no one is going to stop me from eating it. If I want to have a Chick-fil-A sandwich, guess what? I'm going to have a Chick-fil-A sandwich. So it really doesn't matter what a person thinks. People say a lot of crazy things. But anyway, it just comes down to it. If I want a Chick-fil-A sandwich, I'm going to have a Chick-fil-A sandwich. So you can run and tell that. So it's crazy, whatever.
What about the waffle fries?
Now the waffle fries is banging, especially if they hot and a little crispy, get the little... Oh my God, it's sickening. I don't live. It's whatever, people crazy. Say what they want to, I don't care.
George, last week we had a lot of news stories for episode 45. I think we had 6 or 7. We covered all of General Convention, all the chaos, all the aftermath. I mean, we had a full episode last week. It went 103 minutes. We didn't have time for a lot of these stories we're going to report this week, which were equally big stories. You were stuck in Indianapolis, the cesspool of heat, politics, Robert's rules, and a bunch of people trying to figure out how to do social gospel. I, on the other hand, as the in charge of the assignment desk, got to go to Forward in Faith at North America in St. Louis. I was at Lady of the Snows, you were at Lady of the Sorrows. So,
yes, indeed.
Whilst there, they passed a resolution asking for a moratorium from the College of Bishops of the Anglican Church of America on allowing for women's ordination. And that's quite interesting because this has kind of been the elephant in the room from Ridgecrest.
You're absolutely right, Kevin. When we were in North Carolina, the conversation at the lunch and dining tables was about women's ordination. Some very strong supporters and proponents of women's ordination, the ACNA, and some equally powerful opponents of women's ordination, yet this topic did not break out into the public sessions.
Well, what's interesting about what Forward in Faith has done with this resolution is they don't say we just want a moratorium. They say we want to study the issue. We want to pause and say, for the first time ever in our church, let's see what the Bible says and do a study on church history and see how women's ordination fits into everything.
And I think it's important to say Forward in Faith is not being reactionary. They're not saying stop to the church and just standing in front of the forces of progress. What they're trying to do is to see that the ACNA moves forward in a theologically coherent fashion. See, in the wider Anglican communion, women's ordination was mostly brought about by political fiat. In the Episcopal Church, for example, it was introduced by political means through the General Convention process, and the study and the theological spade work that had to be done really wasn't done, and it was done after the fact. We had something called the Eames Commission, led by the Archbishop of Ireland, Robin Eames, that basically said in Anglicanism we have two understandings of orders, some who oppose and some who support women's ministries, but we're not going to decide. Both are equally valid and one should not be penalized or one preferred over the other. Sadly, the reality is that opponents of women's ordination have been marginalized in the Episcopal Church and the Church of England, And I think there's a sense in the ACNA that they don't want to be marginalized. Forward of Faith doesn't want to be marginalized in the future, and they want this thing to be fought through and a theological principle established rather than political log rolling.
Well, I was talking to a bishop at Forward in Faith, and he said the problem is there's a lot of stuff we brought with us from tech that was never really studied. You know, there very well may be a theological argument for women's ordination. We don't know because we never had the opportunity as a church to study it. It's just something we inherited from the Episcopal Church. And we want to be sure that we're shedding the stuff that we inherit and that we make these on our own. Bishop Ackerman himself, I'm going to summarize what he said in his statement to the group there. He said, we're like a ship that just sank, and we're on the lifeboats. We've arrived to an island, and now it's time to be sure we don't misuse the resources of this island, that the trees are used for the right thing, and we don't turn into the Lord of the Flies. And this is all, you know, very good that we, you know, have a time of reflection and do this as a study as a church and not do this as something we just inherited from the Episcopal Church.
And I think, Kevin, we need to read the Forward in Faith resolution calling for a moratorium in terms of sort of the internal divide within the ACNA of two types of ex-Episcopalians. We have those who left after 2003 and those who left before 2003. Those who left after 2003 are accused by some of those who went out earlier of saying that, well, the Episcopal Church was fine until Gene Robinson came along and became a bishop, and the status quo 2003 is what they want. Well, some want the status quo 1979. That has not been worked out within the ACNA. And those two competing visions, if they are indeed accurate descriptions of where people are, need to be put to a theological test. And that's what Forward in Faith is doing.
Well, it's interesting because it's so nice to watch Christian brothers work together, because they worked with Archbishop Duncan on the statement and be sure that he's aware of everything they're doing. And in the end, they're not calling for anything other than a study. They want to be sure we're doing this. If we're going to do this, we're doing it for the right reasons. And I think, wow, kudos to them. They're not demanding that anybody stop. They're asking that, you know, let's take a time, and it's an important issue. It's been an issue. I mean, I remember reading parts of the early church fathers calling this a heresy in the church. I think they just want to study and be sure it's something coherent and understandable, and hats off to them for the way they're approaching this. George, let's talk about Metropolitan Jonah. Many of our viewers probably understand that last week he resigned as the Metropolitan of the Orthodox Church in America. Why is this important to Anglican TV viewers? Well, he was one of the original supporters of the Anglican Church in North America. He showed up in Bedford, Texas, gave a speech about what it would take for ACNA to raise itself up to a level where they could be in unity with the Orthodox Church in America. That's kind of cool. Metropolitan Jonah's a young guy. He's hip. He's got the lingo. He's an Episcopalian who converted to the Orthodox Church. As far as I was concerned, he had everything going for him, and he likes Anglican TV. He's a great guy. Now the problem is, did he resign or did he get kicked out of office?
He was pushed, shoved, thrown out.
That's right. Ay, ay, ay. And from what we've been able to learn, he signed a resignation letter pretty much under distress, with people looking over him saying, saying, listen, I'm not qualified for the job, and I don't have the skills to lead this church. Okay, let's talk about the Orthodox Church. The Orthodox Church in America is proud of its heritage, its tradition, its theology. They've never had a heresy. There's a lot of good things about the Orthodox Church globally. There's some bad things. They're stuck in the 7th century. Okay, and Metropolitan Jonah wanted to bridge the gap from the 7th century to the 20th century. Kevin, you mean the 21st? No, you'll never get them to the 21st century, but let's settle for the 20th. And in doing that, he had so much against him. He was not Russian.
Mm-hmm.
He did not have what they pride in their heritage. He was American. He was an Episcopalian convert, and he did not meet that, what the Synod would call a requirement to lead the church and be somebody with a Slavic tongue,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. And he had a lot of other things going against him as well, George.
Well, I think the Synod released a letter after it forced him out, giving all these reasons why he should go. He was a poor administrator, he had not followed their advice, and then they went into specific details of some cases, which later turned out not to be true. There was one case where Metropolitan Jonah shielded a priest who was allegedly a rapist. Well, that man was never an Orthodox priest, and Jonah never shielded him. But the point, I think, that Jonah wasn't trying to introduce doctrinal change. He was trying to introduce structural change. He was trying to make the church more transparent, more agile, and move away from sort of old ethnic ghetto mindset that we're Greeks, we're Serbians, we're Macedonians. He wanted to be Christian. And for reasons that we'll never fully understand because we're not Orthodox, Jonah was found to be wanting and given the door. And it's a terrible shame because for the ACNA, because Jonah was a friend to the Anglican Church of North America. He attended their meetings. He gave them encouragement, and he was a very strong player in the ecumenical world, signing these international statements for upon moral issues, abortion and gay marriage. And he was a forward-thinking man who just got chopped off at the knees by the people in back of him.
Yeah, it was interesting because I remember the first controversy was he signed the Manhattan Declaration,
Mm-hmm.
which is a declaration of faith and should the church stand up to the government. And, that was the first thing that chopped him off at the feet. And then, further on, every time he wanted to do something 20th or 21st century based, not in theology, but in transparency, people within inside his synod and church fought ways to stop him. And I remember very vividly a year ago, all these blogs were forming, the pro-Jonah blogs and the anti-Jonah blogs, and they were fighting it over. And somebody in the organization figured out how to break into email, and they would post the email letters from other people on the other side. And you're just like, oh my gosh, what's happening to the Orthodox Church? They're imploding from within. And this is the result of a church that's really in struggle internally as to their identity.
That's an excellent point, Kevin. Excellent point. The Orthodox Church in America doesn't know who it is. It knows what it believes.
Right.
It's not wavered in any way from the fundamentals of its Christian faith and traditions. But who it is and how it lives out that faith, how it models its behavior. Jonah was beaten up over signing the Manhattan Declaration, not because what was in the Manhattan Declaration, but because his signature appeared next to heretics like Baptists, people who were not considered Christians by some Orthodox leaders. And that's a shame.
It is a shame. It's going to be interesting to see who they replace him with or if he gets recalled. But this is a situation that we as Anglicans want to pray for our Orthodox brothers and sisters. We've been there. We know what it's like to have a church in shambles. We're still recovering. We're just off the Titanic. We're on an island. Let's hope they can reach an island as well. George, let's move on to another story involving another Metropolitan. Her name is Metropolitan Catherine Jefferts Shorey. We're studying here the aftermath of General Convention, and every day there's another letter in my email box from another bishop explaining why he voted for same-sex blessings. Another one says he did not vote for same-sex blessings. Another one says he voted for same-sex blessings, but it can't happen in his diocese. Another voted against same-sex blessings, but he would allow it in his diocese. Another says this means we can have same-sex marriages. And I'm like, what is wrong with this church? How can it be so autonomously crazy when we should have a metropolitan shori in control of everything?
Kevin, you've hit on the big issue of General Convention, and that is the structure and order of the church. We had proposals to sell 815 Second Avenue. We had proposals to have the presiding bishop keep her diocesan title and basically be a half-time presiding bishop. And they eventually decided to put together a grand blue ribbon commission to investigate all of this. But the fight at General Convention wasn't between liberals and conservatives. It was between those who had an idea of the Episcopal Church being smaller, leaner, and theologically unified, and those who thought the Episcopal Church should represent a spectrum of views and have nobody kicked out for not following the party line, allowing a loyal opposition.
Well, the people who wanted a lean, mean fighting machine won. Okay, the people who want, this grandiose structure of a metropolitan and somebody in charge of everything, giving the vision, the way, the truth, the life, speaking almost papally, lost.
Yes, the No Pope coalition, if you will, was led by President Bonnie Anderson.
Sure.
She wanted, even though she resigned, announced she was not running for office, and effectively she's a political loser, her ideas won. Presiding Bishop Catherine Jefferts Schori, who came in and is, if you will, the victor because she's still standing after the fight, her ideas lost. Though she remains very, very popular, her vision of a church where everybody toes the party line failed. And we can see that in the budget, we can see that in the resolutions adopted, and we can see it in the attitude in which people brought to this convention. There was no sense this time round that if you voted the wrong way, you were a heretic and had to be gone. And that was something very, very strong in past General Conventions.
Yeah, and that is interesting. I mean, the true conservatives did not have a unified voice, so there was no real fighting going back and forth. It wasn't like having Bishop Duncan, Bishop Iker, and a coalition of conservatives of the ACN who had, quite a bit of sway at the House of Bishops. Right now, it's like 3 or 4 guys, and they'll speak as individuals, but there's no, cohesiveness in their message. And I think that allowed for what you're talking about to play out. That's noise from the side, we'll let him be noisy.
Well,
and
I think we also need to say the tone changed. And this time around, I can only remember 2 really nasty outbursts at General Convention in the House of Bishops. Gene Robinson got up at the House of Bishops and laid into David Virtue, attacking him for questioning whether or not Gene Robinson's marriage to his partner had broken up. And he went off and off and off about how terrible David Virtue was. And then on another day, Catherine Roscom, retired bishop, suffragan bishop of New York, somebody said, well, isn't it great that we have a woman as presiding bishop? Doesn't it show that women are now equal? And she got up and had a temper tantrum and said, until there are at least 1/3 of the bishops as women, I will not be satisfied about equality. That's the old style Episcopal Church General Convention.
Sure.
Nasty, partisan, personal. Those are the only 2 instances I can think of this time around. And those two outbursts were greeted more with quiet embarrassment of, oh dear, let's hope nobody's listening to crazy Aunt Sally in the attic, as opposed to, yes, we must crush all evildoers and non-right-thinking people.
well, let's talk quickly about some of the things that did come up that the results were surprising. Open communion.
Open communion, the bishop said no. And here's
What?
the shocker. Bishop William Gregg, assistant of North Carolina, who is a liberal, got up and said, it is not up to the Episcopal Church to change the settled doctrine on such an important issue. We cannot go forward unless our ecumenical partners do so as well. Now, this is a guy who votes for gay marriage, but he's saying we can't do this on baptism. And that view of Bishop Gregg prevailed, and the bishop said, no changes for baptism. It remains the same. You must be baptized before you receive communion.
All right, next issue. Do pet dogs and pet goldfish go to heaven?
The Episcopal Church doesn't know. We're officially agnostic. Now, Thomas Aquinas believes that no animals are in heaven, while other Christian thinkers like C.S. Lewis, for instance, say they do, and the Episcopal Church has decided not to decide. How did this come up? Well, somebody wrote some funeral rites for pets, and it had one point that we will see Fido and Fluffy at the resurrection of the dead, and the bishop said, no, we really don't want to go that far, and pulled all that out and said, use this if you want, but this has got nothing to do with us folks.
Okay, now here's what I always find funny, and I've noticed this over the last 6 or 7 conventions. What is funny to you and I and the normal common person at one convention is the big controversy at the next convention. So I predict next convention, open communion, animal prayers, and Title IV will be the big controversies. What happened with Title IV this time?
Title IV, oh, that was an embarrassment. They had 92 changes proposed to Title IV, and they admitted it was a mess. However, the Constitution and Canons Committee who wrote it said, well, our underlying theories were good. We just have to sort of fix it so it matches the theories. And so they're going to basically take it back and rework the whole thing so as to respond to the 92 pointed criticisms. But it's still in effect, but they've basically conceded it's a mess.
Well, that reminds me of the old Dan Rather, George Bush controversy where he made up this fake letter and he got found out. He goes, well, what's in the letter is true, the content of it's true, what it means is true, even though it's fake. But, you know, because it's true, it's true. You know, and it bugs me so much to watch people just not work out their arguments logically.
Well, Kevin, I do need to disagree with you. I think the next General Convention will see animal ordinations, not animal prayers, be an issue.
Oh, man. Well, I'm sending you from the assignment desk to the next General Convention. From sunny California, I have on the other line Alan Haley, and he's going to give us an update and his take on really kind of the fallout, the nuclear fallout of General Convention. We've run into a few issues that seem to be bigger than the bishops that were discussing them. One is, this new structure of the church, can it be supported by their ideals? 2, what is the role of the church? Are they even close to how the church was established a couple centuries ago? And 3, is Catherine Jefferts Schori really become a metropolitan? And what's the role of the laity in all this? And Alan, you've always put out unique perspectives on your blog, Anglican Curmudgeon. What do you make of all this?
Well, on the whole, I think General Convention did worse than it did good. Mm-hmm. I think it has contributed to the decline and undermining of the Episcopal Church as a whole. And particularly I'm saying that in respect of 2 things, that one of which grabbed the headlines, the other did not. The same-sex blessings is the obvious one. The way they went about that was completely irregular, unconstitutional. They threw all the prayer book out, they threw all the Constitution out, and they just did as they pleased. And of course, they couldn't force everyone to come along with it. They had to put a conscience clause in, and then the result of this is going to be what we call liturgical anarchy in the Episcopal Church over the next triennium. Some people are going to be able to obtain blessings in some dioceses of the church, and those blessings are going to be quote-unquote provisional, which, provisional means that it's only a trial or something experimental. It's made provision for an emergency or temporary situation with the idea that it's going to be replaced down the road. So anybody getting one of these blessings has to wonder, what did I get here? How can God bless something provisionally?
Well, you said the word replaced. It could also be undone.
It can be undone, exactly, withdrawn. Mm-hmm. So that's the point of a provisional thing. If you make changes to the rites and the liturgy of the church, it's supposed to be for all people in all the church. That's what it means to have a book of common prayer. Mm-hmm. This has been defined the Episcopal Church since 1789, the very first year it was organized, and the very first edition of the Book of Common Prayer was approved after being run carefully by the archbishops in England to make sure that there was nothing wrong, nothing unorthodox, and assuring them we were continuing the traditions of the Church of England. And they had to beg the archbishops for their approval of this liturgy, and they had to make a few changes. And now we're completely dictating to the rest of the Anglican Communion what this, provisional liturgy is going to be. And it won't be recognized in all the churches of the Episcopal Church. So what does it mean to be, it's like the balkanization that we have going on with the civil laws right now. In some states you can get married if you're a same-sex couple, and in other states it's forbidden. And we seem to be preferring this me first, where if I want it, I get it. So if I want it, I go to a place where it'll give it to me. And the hell with the rest of it, and we can just let the church take care of itself or fend for itself. Well, that, as I say, is just undermining the whole point of being a church.
Well, it makes second-class citizens of people of the church. I, as a married heterosexual, have to keep my sexuality in check. I cannot have an adulterous affair. I have to follow the biblical principles of sexuality. There's a whole lot about my sexuality that is controlled by the Holy Spirit and the nature of matrimony. That does not apply.
Well, the people who are doing this say it doesn't apply, but actually, Kevin, if you read the biblical text, it does apply.
Well,
they're supposed to be celibate outside of marriage, and marriage is between a man and a woman. So, you first have to undefine marriage, and then you can say, well, then anything can go up. As long as we let a marriage be anything we say it is, then what happens to the rest of it? So, yeah, the rules are relaxed for those whom it fits. As I say, it's one size it does not fit all.
Uh-huh.
We do not have common worship throughout the church or common liturgical standards, and it's anarchy. And it's just going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, I have to agree with you there. Before we started taping, we were in the green room together. This is my green room. And you were talking about how the General Convention used to meet for 30 days.
Yeah.
That it wasn't a 10-day or a 5-day affair.
Almost 3 weeks sometimes.
Uh-huh.
And the idea was that it was a group of bishops that would come together, and clergy and their lay people would come together once every 3 years, and they would hear reports on the state of the church. Everyone would tell what was going on in their diocese, how many people they'd ordained, and so on. And they'd all hear the reports, and they might pass a few canons and so on, but then they would all go back home to their dioceses, and that would be it. And there was no political thought, no attempt to make the church take political stands of the day and be the popular crusader that we now try to make it with all these resolutions that are being passed. So the structure of the Episcopal Church, as it was designed and founded in 1789, that foundation is too fragile to bear this huge political superstructure that has been erected on top of it in the last 75 years or so, with all the political activism and everybody wanting to use the church as a sounding board for their latest causes. And they get people to vote for their cause if they agree to vote for the other people's cause. And so you end up having hundreds of resolutions passed on all kinds of world-crazy topics. And they all feel good for it and then go back. And so what have they accomplished? In the meantime, the main problems of the church, the actual way the church is supposed to work under the Great Commission from Jesus Christ, gets second chair, gets actually hind chair. It's way back and down toward the bottom. And they barely, managed to pass a resolution this time, saying that affirming the faith of Jesus Christ as it was handed to us. So, and anyway, I'm just saying,
you're giving a bleak picture, and hey, for all intents and purposes, it was a bleak conference. But my question is there hope in stuff like the desire by the House of Deputies to sell 815? Does that give us a future hope in a restructuring of the Episcopal Church?
I think that was more a gesture of frustration with the power plays that the presiding bishop had been engaging in before General Convention. Uh-huh. I don't look for it to go anywhere because I think the bishops are going to act as a brake on anything like that. And it'll have to get financially, things will have to get a lot more worse before that is seriously pushed through. They're going to do
you're saying next week then?
They're going to do a study on it, bring it back, just like the restructuring that they shoved that off. That instead of calling a special convention, which would have made everyone afraid of what could be done, they decided to just appoint a joint task force, up to 24 people who are supposed to be picked by the presiding bishop and the president of the House of Deputies, but they're supposed to have a critical distance from the structure of those already in power. So we'll have to.
I have these canons here that say there is a structure committee.
Exactly. There's already a joint commission on the structure of the church. It was completely bypassed. It's been basically relegated to the side table. And this new outfit is supposed to come and reinvent the Episcopal Church after 250 years of people trying. The last time they did this was in 1895, 1898. It finally resulted in the Constitution of 1901, which is what we basically have today, with a few amendments and things like that. And it was in 1895, don't forget, that the Bishop of Quincy back then proposed a measure to insert a supremacy clause into the church's constitution, saying the General Convention would be the highest body in the church, able to impose its will on all the dioceses. And that proposal went out to the various dioceses in the 3 years between 1895 and 1898. When they came back in 1898, there was scarcely a diocese that voted for it. So we abandoned this idea of a top-heavy church over 100 years ago, and it has never been successfully resurrected, but the people like to pretend at the top that we still are that today, and that's mainly because most of the people back in the pews don't pay attention and let them get away with murder. And that's what's going on right now, and as I say, it's kind of like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic a bit. They've got this restructure commission. It's going to come back with a report in 2015, and what anybody does with it then is anybody's guess. It will take 2 years, two general conventions, 6 years to make any significant amendments to the structure. And what they're going to come up with, who knows, because there's so many forces fighting for this. We've stopped being a religious church. We've gone to being a political forum for advanced causes. And how can you run a church? How can you be a church, fulfill the mission of the church, when you're so politically charged and concerned with politics? The last time people tried that was, the Borgias. Think of the Borgias. Yeah. That was when the church really mixed politics with religion, and it didn't work. And everybody, looks back on that period and recognizes what a disaster it was for the church and its reputation. So I can't understand what's behind it. I know to a legislator, if they feel like there's a problem out there, we've got to pass a law or resolution to solve it. It's the way Mark Twain once said that to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And to a legislator, everything looks like a problem they can solve with a resolution or pass a new law or something like that. And we have to stop this idea that we can keep tinkering and fix it in the hope that things will get better, because things are getting worse and it's not helping a bit.
Via the magic of that little icon on my desktop, I keep clicking. I click Skype, I get Peter. I click Skype, I get Peter. Peter, how you doing?
I'm all right, thank you, Kevin. Yeah.
Do you notice a lot of people that are really buff and muscular walking around you in London nowadays?
No, but I did sit next to some Venezuelans yesterday at pizza in the evening.
Oh, pizza!
I knew that they were Venezuelans because they had tracksuits on with Venezuela on the back of them.
So London's been invaded. I've been reading some really strange stories about some evil bishops that exist in the Church of England.
Apparently we have one or two.
Yes. Tell me about the story I'm reading about Wallace Ben, Bishop Ben.
Yeah, Wallace Ben is not, for the record, an evil bishop. He's actually a rather nice bishop. He's a conservative evangelical bishop. Wallace Ben has been telling clergy off, and in particular, two clergy, one called Howard Cox and one called David Page. And what has happened was, 3 years ago, the Reverend David Page, who just happened to be one of the top bods on changing attitude, the gay rights sort of lobby, retired from his church in Southwark and moved to a little town called Winklesea, which is a wonderfully English name, which is in Chichester Diocese.
Okay.
And he applied for a PTO, which is permission to officiate, so basically a kind of license. And his suffragan bishop was Wallace Ben. And Wallace Ben, knowing that David Page was in a civil partnership, and knowing that the bishop's pastoral letter of 2005 says that bishops should make inquiries as to whether clergy civil partnerships are celibate or not, asked David Page whether he was celibate or not.
So you don't have a don't ask, don't tell policy.
No. Well, no. Officially, we have if you tell us you're in a civil partnership, we ask you whether the civil partnership is celibate or not, because clergy are not allowed to be in sexual relationships outside of marriage. So David Page gets highly offended by this perfectly legal question and refuses to answer. So Wallace Ben says, well, if you refuse to answer, I can't give you the permission to officiate. So you don't have permission to officiate. Right? But it appears that what happens is that David Page goes back to his parish church that he's moved into in Winglesea, goes to the vicar, a guy called Howard Cox, and goes to the PCC and says, he's refused to give me PTO. And they go, well, we like you, so we'll let you preside at communion and preach and lead anyway.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You can't do that.
Apparently not, no. That would be against the law, as in canon law, which is the law of England.
Right.
So this goes merrily on for 3 years. Howard Cox, the vicar, then decides to retire, at which point David Page goes back to the bishop and says, I would like to have a PTO so I can work in the parish during the interregnum and help the parish out. And it's not as if I haven't been doing it for 3 years anyway, and I'm quite happy to give you the assurances that you want. At which point Wallace Ben goes, hang on a minute. Now, he's got a beard, so I can imagine him going like this. Hang on a minute. Let's just backtrack a minute. You disobeyed me for 3 years. Yes, says David Page. Wallace Ben goes, asks David Page for the reasons why he couldn't give assurances 3 years ago that his relationship wasn't sexual, but now is perfectly happy to do so. What's changed? And could you please explain why you've conducted 40-plus services without a PTO? This is a bad thing. And Reverend Howard Cox, could you please explain why you have let him do this, knowing that he's a PTO? Their answers were essentially, basically, because my call to ministry is higher than my subordination to any bishop. And so what happens is that the Archdeacon of Lewis slaps a charge against the both of them, and quite right too.
Yeah.
And they get all uppity about it, and there's a series of blog posts on changing attitude.
My question is, how does Wallace Ben get in trouble then?
Well, now you see, this is the sticky bit. Okay, Wallace Ben is in a bit of trouble over some child abuse things that may or may not have happened in churches of diocese, and PTOs that he may or may not have issued. Now, there is no evidence whatsoever that Wallace Ben's failure to do something led to any abuse. Right. It's more a case of, for example, there's this one guy who was recently arrested by the police, who in the late 90s asked for a PTO. It was finally disclosed that he had this abuse thing from the 50s. He was at that time very, very ill. So Wallace Ben gave him a PTO only to be used in the nursing home that he was at. The thinking being, let's be graceful, which is the thing that liberals keep on going on about gracefulness. Let's be graceful to the man, and let's let him do communion services in the nursing home where he's dying. Okay? The fact that he didn't actually die got a bit better, and then went and did a wedding in the church that he wasn't meant to.
There's the trouble.
Exactly. And so basically the liberals are going, oh no, evil Wallace Ben is perfectly happy to give PTOs to paedophiles, but not to wonderful, monogamous, loving, caring, gay clergy.
But can't this guy claim that his call is higher than his sexual? Well, whatever.
The only real link between the two stories, Kevin, is this. Back in the late 90s, Wallace Ben gave a PTO with clear restrictions to a clergyman, and the clergyman broke those restrictions. In 2009, Wallace Ben refused to give a PTO to a clergyman, so basically restricted him from our ministry, and that clergyman broke his restrictions. That's the real kind of link here between the two cases.
So, bishop says yes, people turn out to be bad, so the bishop is bad. That's how things work in England?
Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, it's a bit more complicated. We could spend hours going into it. There's all kinds of stuff. How the diocesan had stuff in a file that he didn't give to Wallace Ben, and the cock up in administration. But the key thing is, no child got abused because a mistake was made. It was rather they didn't know about people having done stuff. They didn't do the proper paperwork, and so they gave people PTOs that they really shouldn't have given. But nobody, there's no harm done by the giving of the PTO.
Yeah.
You know, if a bishop should have checked up on somebody and didn't, and gave them a license, and that person then in a position where they were licensed abused a child, I'd say sack the bishop. But that's not the case.
All right. Well, thank you for your update. Now, you are somewhere on the outskirts of London on the Thames, right?
I'm right in the middle of London at the moment.
Okay.
Right on the Thames. Next week for my work, we're still working in central London, but I decided to get a hotel to the west of London, away from the Olympics, and I should be commuting by a boat.
By boat. Now, let's do a prediction. I predict that you'll be hearing the national anthem of America more than any other national anthem over the next 21 days. What's your prediction for gold medals in the Olympics?
My prediction is that I will turn the TV on when Britain has a good chance of winning, and that'll be my sample.
Well,
as a good.
Yeah, I think Bradley Wiggins with the time trial. You got a couple good sprinters out there. You got a good diver.
Yeah.
So I think you're gonna get some gold medals. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get it back here. We've got an outside chance on the football as well. Sort of home advantage. I think it's more exciting here for people just to have the Olympics here. Basically, that's the real deal.
Well, I understand there's been some security issues as well, as far as the MP4 not pull. Oops.
Yeah. We have a security firm called G4S.
Yeah, G4S.
Won the tender for providing security. We now have more army doing security here than we have in Afghanistan, because basically people just haven't turned up and done stuff, and it's just been a complete nightmare. And the chief executive G4S got dragged along to a parliamentary committee, and one of the MPs there said it's been a bit of a balls up that he's kind of slang, hasn't it? And the guy just basically sits there and goes,
"Yep,
yeah." So that's not exciting as on the top of some of the tower blocks around the Olympic Park, the surface-to-air missiles and stuff like that. That's cool.
All right, my friend. Till next week when I click on the little blue button of Skype and I get my Peter Old time.
Yay!
Till then, bye-bye. George, let's move on to a global story here. I'm going to talk about Nigeria, what's happening in Africa. We've reported before there's been Muslim and Christian violence going on in the Jos area, Sudan and other parts of Africa. And it's really becoming a tricky situation, because what we've noticed now is Christians have decided to, in part, fight back, and that's really causing more political turmoil.
Yes, last week, 100 villagers, Christian villagers, were massacred by Muslim Fulani tribesmen. And it was a conflict between farmers and herders, great people grazing their cattle. And the Boko Haram, the Muslim militant group that's behind much of the violence in the north, has egged on these clashes, these tribal and ethnic clashes. And hundreds of people are being killed, and it's just a difficult situation. And now we have vigilante groups attacking Muslims in the south. in retaliation, supposedly, for attacks on Christians in the north.
Now, an archbishop there said, basically, if you're retaliating, you're not Christian. And I don't know, this is a new approach, but basically he's trying to be very proactive here and saying Christians don't retaliate.
Yes, Archbishop Edmund Akanya, who's the Archbishop of Kaduna and Bishop of Kebbi in northern Nigeria, said that he had called upon Christians in the north to stay and pray. Stay in your homes, don't flee the area to become a refugee in the south, and pray. Now, take steps, put up barricades in front of your churches so somebody can't drive a car bomb into it, but do not retaliate against your Muslim neighbor. Those people who claim to be Christians and who are retaliating with violence are not Christians. They're thugs, the Archbishop said. And a Christian must love his enemy, must love the person who's attacking him, and now is the time for the Christians of Nigeria to show the world their faith is real and not return evil for evil, but return love for evil.
Now, here in Western society, we could say, well, how hard can that be? Well, on the ground in Jos, Nigeria, it's much different. These communities are not just communities of neighbors and stuff like that, but your next door neighbor is your brother, and he helps in your farm, and these are very close-knit people who are not retaliating just because they lost something, but because somebody they know was killed. And it's a multi-level retaliation, some vengeance, some to get back the plunder that was stolen from them, and it's a very difficult situation. Yet, if we look at the model of South Africa 20 years ago, where they decided not to retaliate against their oppressors after the fall of apartheid, I got to say that there is a good genesis for not retaliating.
Absolutely. And now there will be people who will fall short of this ideal. We're not saying that no Christians are acting badly, nor are all Muslims murderers. But
Right.
what we're seeing here is the church taking a stand, its leaders making a public stance. This is right, this is wrong, and if you call yourself a Christian, you will not strike back. And that is something that is just so unusual in this world, because our political leaders are so quick to attack and destroy and say terrible things about people who don't agree with them and call us to fight back. And here, there are people preaching peace. That's not the way of the world.
No, it's not. And this is actually an Anglican TV viewer intervention. This is a chance for you to pray about this situation. Your brothers and sisters are being killed in Nigeria, Tanzania, the Congo, Rwanda,
Sudan, Pakistan, and
Afghanistan, because of their faith. This is called for by the New Testament, that it's going to happen. It is happening. It's not happening the way we thought it would in our Western eyes, but it's happening. And this is a time that you pray for your brothers and sisters, that you provide for financial resources, support resources, and get involved in what's happening to people of faith overseas. George, General Convention was a meeting here happening in America. Just a few short days later, there was a meeting held in Bangkok, Thailand, of the Global South. Now, all of you guys are freaking out surprised. There was a Global South meeting. I know, I wasn't there. Nobody told me about it. Nobody told you about it. It's one of these things that just happened. I don't know.
9 primates were in Bangkok, and we didn't even get T-shirts, Kevin.
I know. It's well, it's one of those things nobody knew before and nobody cares after. It's weird because this isn't how the GAFCON or the Global South usually operate. Usually they're operating, when they do meet together, the primates are responding to a conflict in the communion. And I remember Kampali, Dar es Salaam, all these places around the world where these bishops meet, and they meet and they get together to discuss and pray and say, there's things wrong with the church internally and externally. This is our suggestion, and they put it out in a communique.
And Kevin, even when they have secret meetings, where they've always told you or me or other journalists that we're having a secret meeting, we can't tell you what we're discussing, but we're still meeting to discuss important stuff. This came out of the blue.
Absolutely. It was off everybody's radar except for the people who went there, which is disappointing because in case you didn't know this, Global South, you are the hope of the communion. GAFCON, if nobody told you, a lot of people are putting a lot of hope in who you are and what you intend to do. Now, George and I fully realize that a lot of what you've done has been stomped on and smushed by some people in a palace called Lambeth in London. We understand that, but that doesn't mean you keep watering down your statements. What did they say this time about the same-sex liturgies? It was kind of,
They were disappointed.
disappointing.
That was the verb, disappointed. They weren't shocked, they weren't appalled, they did not say this would tear the communion. They were just disappointed.
Now, some of me operates and says, well, I'm not trying to be critical, I'm trying to show my disappointment. I'm disappointed in the statement that came out of the Global South. You know, what has happened to the great leaders of the church who could show direction when they had disappointment, who could show correction when they had disappointment, who knew the way forward? Well, what happened to those primates?
They've retired. There are no Peter Akinolas on the stage anymore. In other words, there are no longer people of sufficient stature and personal charisma who can unite these disparate people. In other words, Sudan's got its problems, Kenya's got its problems, Tanzania's got its problems, internal problems, but they've always had these problems, but Peter Akinola was able to unite for brief moments all these people and to focus on a specific issue and a specific agenda. We don't have a person of those characteristics or qualities on the scene today.
Well, another thought occurred to me too is they know there's another hope in America, and that's the Church in North America. They don't really have to put all that time and energy into fighting the Episcopal Church when there is a solution here.
What I think about is perhaps they're just sitting tight till there's a new Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yep.
Maybe they had a meeting, it's planned, Rowan Williams announced his retirement, really can't change the meeting because the room's been paid for, so they're just going to have a nice weekend in Bangkok and see what happens in December when there's a new Archbishop. We don't know. I don't know.
We shall see. I'm expressing my disappointment, not criticism, in what I've seen because of all the great things you've done in the past. Every time you get together, you have the opportunity to do great things. George, we have a very global audience, and this week here in America we had a tragedy in Aurora, California. A gentleman who dropped out of college, was able to purchase some weaponry, dyed his hair red, walked into a theater during the opening of Batman, and was able to kill 12 people and injure close to 60. Here in America, that's a tragedy. Here in other parts of the world, that's something that happens more frequently and is dealt with much differently. It happened in Norway, it's happened in Africa, it's happened in Germany, it's happened to a schoolyard in Scotland 20 years ago. These are times when people go, what on earth is happening? Well, let me tell you something. In case we forgot, and maybe this happens because we forget, there is evil in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we live in a world where there is good and there is evil. There's righteousness and there's unrighteousness. And every once in a while, something like this just gathers us and says, how can God explain this? And God isn't left to explain this. He told us long ago, we're going to fight a world of spirituality, and a world of men, and a world of evil. Mm-hmm. And look what we found here.
We do not know why bad things happen to good people. There are a lot of very educated academic theories, but at the end of the day, it's a mystery. But we do know what to do when bad things happen to good people, and that is to comfort and to share the good news of Jesus Christ and encourage people to reach out to the hand that is extended to them of God's love and power.
It's the ultimate paradox. Do I worship a God who protects me from these things? Yes. I also worship a God who is with me during these things, who is with me during the fire, who's with me in the theater during a shooting. He also has the ability for intervention. Those are the mysteries of God, and it's that paradox that we live in, that we don't fully understand these natures, and we won't until the end. George and I are, lift up in our prayers the families of the victims themselves, the people who are recovering, the glorious birth of a baby yesterday from one of the women who was injured in the shooting. But now is the time to really sit down and contemplate, where God is in your life, because you just witnessed evil. If you know there's evil, there's certainly a God. Welcome to the end of episode 46 of Anglican Unscripted, the most unscripted episode we've ever done. Now, George, let's introduce our vast audience to new opportunities coming up here on Anglican Unscripted. We're going to offer advertising opportunities, whether it be product placement, whether it be other things happening on the show. If you are somebody who has something that you want to sell and you want us to advertise or talk about on the show, we would be glad to do so. That's something that we want to open up to our viewers and future sponsors. If you have a seminary you want students to go to, whatever really you want to get the message out here, we have slots during the show we're opening up to advertising.
And Kevin, this spot right here is for sale. We're like NASCAR. If you want to have your logo appear on our fine outfits
sure.
for this show,
yeah, okay.
We're more than happy to sell ourselves and our souls.
I mean, it's only money, really. But if you have bananas, dole, apple, whatever products, we're here for you. And it's a way for us to generate revenue, because we got a big travel schedule coming up. George and I have been invited to go to what new archbishop is coming up?
Stanley Ntagali in December.
Yep, so that's going to be in Uganda. We've been not invited, we've been hoping to keep out of the ACC 15 that's going to happen in New Zealand. I've been invited to Colorado to attend a Pair USA event, and we need to generate some income so we can travel. It's fun to sit and watch two guys in chairs, but it's also more fun to watch the world of Anglicanism work together to bring more people to Christ. George, we got lots of comments in last week's show. Why can't we respond to all the comments?
Well, we get so many of them, and some of them have been very thoughtful, very, very provocative. I've received a number of emails from clergy, Episcopal clergy, saying, "Why should I stay in the Episcopal Church? Is it time for me to go? What is your advice?" And I just don't want to say, "Thank you for writing. You decide." I mean, these are things that really have to be thought through, not having quick or flip answers. So we read everything that we get, and some of them we need time to ponder what the best answer is. Others we say thank you very much, and
and many we just don't have time to reply to, and that's just the reality of what goes on here. We get a lot of comments, and we appreciate that. We also want some not just feedback, but story ideas. You guys out there are all around the world, and you know what's happening in your locations, and we got lots of great story ideas of what's happening in England that Peter Old and I talked about. We got story ideas that Alan Haley and I talked about, and we got story ideas that George and I were able to talk about this week. This Jonah thing, it's big because people have been feeding us the information about, hey, I bet you didn't know this, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't know that. And we want to thank you for those emails. Right below it's on the screen is how to contact us and how to friend us on Facebook. I got lots of Facebook friends this last month. How about you, George?
Oh, I've got lots.
That's good.
Don't know any of them.
You don't know them. They love you. No. So thank you for watching. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And you've been watching episode 46 of Anglican Unscripted. Sven and
George.
Oli here. This
Yes.
Sven and Oli with the Anglican report, you know.
George Ski. I'm Kevin Ski.
You want some lutefisk? We've got some right over here in the corner, you know.
Oh, we've expanded to the Polish audience. 3, 2, 1.